I wanted to pick up on what some of the co-panelists have said. Jeff started us off talking about cultural transformations, really rethinking our cultural values, living with water, that hopefully then can lead to behavior change. And I want to touch on something, that Andy said as well, in the context of fire being so interconnected to water and being able to lean into indigenous knowledge. To do that, you have to say, do what Jeff said earlier, which is to transform our cultural values so that we value indigenous knowledge, which through colonialism has been suppressed and targeted violently to be eradicated in many different forms. And then once you reconcile with that past and actually start to value that knowledge system that despite all attempts to eradicate it still exists and is still here, then you have to change your behavior and actually operationalize, as Jeff said earlier, the laws and policies that enable that knowledge and science to thrive. And unfortunately, that's not happening in California. It's moving better, but still not happening in California, and also is limiting the prospects that we have globally in the context of sea level rise. And I'll just give you one example. In the past 2 years, we've had a lot of, again, as I mentioned earlier, the social reckoning with social justice. We have a lot of Karens in the world that like to call the police on people of color who are in forests or by the sea, trying to enact that traditional knowledge, that indigenous knowledge, trying to protect and restore that connection they have with nature. Because for some reason, and it's not for some reason, we've been conditioned through the environmental conservation history of the United States and people like John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt to only view nature. It is to be something that is just there for our viewing consumption, not to actually be in relation with and to have a responsibility to. And so when we come back to what Jeff said earlier, that's the behavior change that we have to start to see. And we're just not there yet. And that actually plays into your question around sea level rise. So we are currently seeing sea level rise, and sea level rise has occurred on our planet for millennia, but it's happening at an increasing frequency than it's ever happened before. And what we also are seeing is, as Jeff noted, a history of infrastructure that is not adaptive to sea level rise because it was constructed under a cultural value system that viewed water as a hazard. It wasn't constructed in a way of, I want to live with water. I want to be in relation with water. No, it was, I'm going to suppress water. I'm going to violently make water retreat from anything around me or near me. And so when we think about what do these rising seas mean for communities? Well, they're coming. They're already here. We have frontline communities from Louisiana to Long Island, where I'm from, that are already facing erosion, storm surge, impacts on groundwater through saltwater intrusion because of rising seas. What we're trying to have addressed at the global level is hopefully for it not to be the worst case scenario of sea level rise, which is 9 feet, complete inundation, which then leads to massive amounts of climate migration from the coastline, likely to the interior or to other parts of the world, where we don't even have enough infrastructure to support water systems in those areas. So, rural communities that are still on well systems, et cetera. So, it really comes, Jeff said it so beautifully at the start. We really have to start thinking about what our water future looks like. And I guess that's a part of this talk. What is that vision look like, and how do we make sure that that vision is inclusive and doesn't reproduce water colonialism for future generations?